and gets all the hot money in the world and somehow comes out of this alive. I don't think there's any way to do that, but they're trying. And that makes the British, in some ways, the biggest loose cannon in the entire current situation. If you want to have a reserve currency, if you want to be a reserve currency, you've got to have a certain amount of basic equipment. You can't just make this up. What you've got to have, among other things, is a market like the U.S. Treasury market. It is the most liquid market in the world. It's an area where large sums of money pass through it every day. Treasury bills, Treasury bonds, Treasury notes. It's a huge market, and you can put in a Treasury bill, and you can be sure that cash will come out in the form of dollars. It's the most liquid market in the world. If you want to be a reserve currency, it means that central banks and other banks around the world are going to start holding that currency. If you don't have something approaching the U.S. Treasury market, you're not going to be qualified. The Japanese have that to some extent. The euro, I think, perhaps a little bit less. So what I would see as the way out of this is a negotiated solution where you recognize that the dollar, the euro, the yen, the ruble, joined together with a possible Arab currency and a probable Latin American regional currency, and have an interlocking set of reserve currencies. People in the Far East might want to keep their reserves in yen. People in Europe will use euros. In North America, it'll be dollars, and similarly in other parts of the world. It's not a basket of currencies. It's an interlocking set of currencies that can be used as reserve currencies. The most important thing is you've got to have fixed parities among them. You've got to know, if you're buying a turnkey factory, you've got to know what a dollar is worth 12, 24, 36 months down the line, because that's when you're going to have to pay. You don't want it to be 30% more or 30% less. It's all got to be predictable. That's fixed parities, narrow bands of oscillation among these currencies, in the same way we had it under Bretton Woods from 1944 to 1971, until the British destroyed that system. The other thing you've got to have is gold settlement. Not that gold is the limit of the credit you can produce, because there's not enough gold. But what you can do is to have clearing among countries. At the end of the year, you add up, what did I sell you, what did you sell me, and who owes what to whom. And then, after doing the clearing, you settle that in gold, meaning that gold comes on the scene as an indispensable reality principle. So you can't just run balance of payments deficits of $500 billion to $1 trillion the way the U.S. has been doing over the past several decades. The track record of the IMF is the destruction of third world economies. Deindustrialization, deregulation, union busting, privatization, the destruction of a social safety net. That's what they've done any time that a third world country has been forced to turn to the IMF for help. The main thing that they lose, of course, is national sovereignty. You're no longer independent if you're dealing with the IMF. Now, the U.S. has paid a price for those policies, because what the IMF does to third world countries is one of the reasons why U.S. exports have stagnated so much. The U.S. used to have an industrial capability to export things that third world countries needed and would have been glad to buy if they could have had a credit facility to do it. So the IMF comes in and says, hey, you third world countries, we're going to drive you into poverty, and we're going to make sure that you pay your debts. But this also means that the demand for U.S. industrial exports was never there. So that's one of the structural features of the post-World War II economy. Other countries have had to go to the IMF. The French had to go to the IMF in the 1950s. During the 1970s, you had Italy going to the IMF. Tremendous humiliation. The British had to go to the IMF in the mid-70s. And every time you go to the IMF, you sign one of those poisoned letters of conditionalities, and you submit to the Washington Consensus, free market, and it destroys your economy. So the danger now is, and has been for some time, that the U.S. itself will have to submit to this Frankenstein's monster, which the U.S. created at Bretton Woods in 1944, but which is now going to come back to haunt us as an instrument of this international finance oligarchy, right? The people like Soros and Maurice Strong and Dominique Strauss-Kahn and the rest of this cosmopolitan financier oligarchy would love to asset strip the U.S. under IMF dictatorship and conditionality. A good example of Obama's foreign policy is Iran. Now, the neocons, Cheney and others, wanted to bomb Iran, and they tried very hard to bomb Iran. They fell short during 2007 with the rogue B-52 affair at the time of the Kenny Bunkport warning, August, September 2007. Now we have a foreign policy not inspired by neocons, but by Zbigniew Brzezinski. The idea here is always that the Middle East is not the main theater, that you got to have a worldwide policy, and that the question of world domination, world supremacy, involves China, Russia, and India more than anybody in the Middle East. Brzezinski does not want to attack Iran. Brzezinski has actually issued a statement saying he wants U.S. fighter jets to shoot down the Israeli Air Force if they try to bomb Iran. Very interesting statement. He called it the USS Liberty in reverse. That got a lot of attention. Why is it that Brzezinski doesn't want the attack on Iran? He has greater things in store for Iran. He doesn't want Iran at war with the United States. That's a loser. That's going to cost you a lot, and you're going to lose. You'll probably collapse in the process. He wants Iran at war with Russia, or with China, or with both, or at least Iran cutting off the oil to China and locked in a tremendous conflict with Russia about the oil of the Caspian Sea and other regional issues. The Obama policy has been, first of all, to continue the Bush destabilization of Iran. This took the form of an attempted color revolution, a CIA people power coup, a velvet revolution, this time the Green Revolution of Tehran. We had the Orange Revolution of Kiev, Ukraine. We had the Roses Revolution of Tiflis, Georgia. Now we've got the Green Revolution of Tehran, Iran. Who is involved? Mousavi, the foreign minister and prime minister of Iran during the 1980s, who ran the Iranian side of the Iran-Iraq war, which was a dream scenario for the U.S. and the British. Imagine Iran and Iraq locked in a war with millions of casualties, both of them devastated and taken care of for an entire decade. As some of them said at the time, the U.S. and the British wanted that war to go on forever, if possible. Mousavi made it possible. Mousavi and Hashemi Rafsanjani, the head of the corrupt and backward mularkey and the bazaar merchants. So the Mousavi and Rafsanjani faction is the CIA coup faction. They attempted to overthrow Ahmadinejad. Who is Ahmadinejad these days? Ahmadinejad is a military man. He's from the Pasdaran Revolutionary Guard. He's similar to Putin in his background, something like military intelligence. So Ahmadinejad is evolving that government more and more towards a traditional military dictatorship. The mullahs, the religious fanatics, play less and less of a role. You'd think that the U.S. would be happy. If Islamic fundamentalism is so bad, why not be happy that Ahmadinejad is cutting down the power of these mullahs? But no, it's the opposite. When you see the Mousavi, Rafsanjani, Green Revolution faction in Tehran going into the streets, they chant death to Russia and death to China. It means that if they take power, they'll cut off the oil to China and they'll look for quarrels with Russia. They're resentful because at the time of the attempted coup, Ahmadinejad got immediate support from Russia and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So that's one side, is to mobilize the rich elitists of North Tehran and the desperate housewives of North Tehran into a mob to try to convince the world that Ahmadinejad lost the election, when there's absolutely no proof that he did. Most of the proof says that Ahmadinejad actually won that election. The other side of it is regional destabilization. You got CIA secret armies working on Iranian territory. This was the program launched by Bush in 2005 and 2006. $400 million plus, some of it for the color revolution stuff, but some of it also for these terrorist secret armies. If you look at Iran, they have significant ethnic minorities around the edges. The Persians are in the middle, but around the edges, what do you have? Facing Iraq, you've got the Kurds. You've got the Arabs in the south of Iran. There's a whole area called Arabistan, which is very important because it has the oil. It has the Abadan oil fields and refinery, the Karg Island tanker terminal. The main oil assets are in an area where there are a lot of Arabs, possibly a majority. You've got Azeris in the northwest of Iran. You've got Turkmen in the northeast. And you've got Baluchistan. The Baluchi people are shared among Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran. That's in the east. Now, in each of these areas, you've got liberation fronts funded and run by the CIA and the British. In Arabistan, there's something I call the BP Liberation Front, British Petroleum Liberation Front. They want to have Arabistan or Ahvaz, the idea being that they want to detach the oil areas from Iran and bring it back under the control of the U.S. and the British. The recent action has been in Baluchistan. A large bombing, suicide bombing, set off at a gathering of officials attended by top commanders of the Pastaran Revolutionary Guards of Iran. 30 to 60 people killed, the ground commander of the Pastaran nationwide killed, and the provincial commander of the same Revolutionary Guards also killed. This is claimed by an organization called Jundullah. Now, Jundullah is almost officially a branch of the CIA. It is a part of the CIA secret budget. We had the London Daily Telegraph in 2005 and 2007 reporting that Jundullah is on the U.S. payroll. They had a State Department official who was named and a CIA official who was not named, saying the U.S. runs Jundullah. Brian Ross of ABC News on television in 2007 says the U.S. runs and pays for Jundullah. And you've also got Seymour Hersh in his famous series of articles in the New Yorker quoting Robert Baer of the CIA saying that Jundullah is an arm of the U.S. intelligence community. So the Iranians are being subjected to terror attacks on the part of the Kurds, this Arabistan group, the Baluchistan group, and others coming up, Azeris and Turkmen not far behind. The goal, of course, being to destroy the nation states of the Middle East and indeed worldwide. The Brzezinski policy, microstates and mini-states, not one Iran, but 4 or 5. A landlocked, oil-free Iranistan in the middle, Kurds, Azeris, Arabs, Turkmen, and Baluchis around the edges seceding. Iraq cut into 3 parts, Kurds, Shiites, and Sunnis. Pakistan, the same story. Sindh, Punjab, Waziristan, Baluchistan, Pashtunistan, all carved out of Pakistan. One of the main targets is also Pakistan. Baluchistan, on the Pakistan side, would include the strategic port of Gwadar. Gwadar is a port in southwest Pakistan today. It just so happens that 40% of the oil tankers in the world sail by the port of Gwadar. One very obvious thing would be to build a tanker terminal at Gwadar and then build a pipeline up across the Pakistan energy corridor and into China, over the Himalayas, above Kashmir. This would solve the biggest single strategic problem of China, which is how to get oil without having to go on the water, where the Anglo-Americans always dominate and can always harass you. And it's also a question of saving a sea voyage of about 10,000 to 12,000 miles, about halfway around the world. If you had an oil pipeline from Iran across the Pakistan energy corridor and into China, that would be an even better solution. And these things can be put together. The goal, therefore, of the Anglo-Americans is to destroy Chinese allies and Chinese economic partners wherever they can be found. Pakistan has got to be broken into pieces. Baluchistan is a key part of that. And the goal has got nothing to do with the dignity of these various ethnic groups, everything to do with creating a chaos.